Mike Tyson, the undisputed heavyweight champion who once terrified opponents all around the globe, lost his freedom, championships, and invincibility in 1992. Convicted and given a 6-year prison sentence. The battle was different in prison. It was pure power and psychology with no referees, gloves, or regulations. Ironically, Tyson initially shunned violence, gaining respect with his manners rather than his fists. However, tension simmered under the surface in a setting based on domination. A brutal fight was brewing, and when it eventually happened, it became a myth. Stick around to uncover the shocking details of Tyson's prison brawl. You won't believe how it unfolded. From champion to inmate, Tyson's downfall. It was 1992 as the world's undisputed heavyweight champion, a worldwide celebrity whose bouts brought in millions of dollars and a cultural phenomenon whose name alone intimidated opponents. Mike Tyson represented the ultimate champion in professional boxing. Then, in a startling turn of events, Iron Mike was accused of assaulting a young woman and taken to trial. The world watched with bated breath as one of the most beloved boxers on the planet fell from grace. Was he really guilty? Was he going to jail? Over the years, the boxer maintained his innocent stance. But the jury found him guilty of the assault and gave him a 6-year jail term. Overnight, the guy who had performed in venues that were completely packed was exchanging the dazzling lights of Las Vegas for the chilly confines of an Indiana jail cell. The change from boxing royalty to prisoner number 9-22335 was quite harsh for Tyson. He had been enjoying the ultimate celebrity lifestyle just months before, complete with private aircraft transporting him between homes, a personal entourage attending to all of his needs, and the admiration of millions of followers throughout the globe. But his popularity meant nothing when he awoke every morning to the impersonal walls of the Indiana Youth Center, later renamed Plainfield Correctional Facility. In a system that aims to rob people of their identities, the same fists that had brought him $30 million in paychecks were now simply the hands of another prisoner. The administrators of the jail understood that harboring such a well-known prisoner may be unsuitable. They first put Tyson in protective custody, which is a type of solitary confinement meant to keep him safe from would-be assailants as well as others who could incite him for the sake of boasting. Despite offering physical safety, this seclusion caused psychological suffering of its own. The man who had been used to being watched all the time, suddenly spent 23 hours a day alone in a 6-by-9-foot cell with nothing to keep him company, save his thoughts and books. The banging of steel doors and the sporadic cries reverberated down cell blocks, replacing the thunderous cheers of arenas. Tyson was in a special place in the jail administration. He was a living legend who had destroyed world champions in a matter of minutes. And some prisoners looked upon him in wonder. Others saw him as an opportunity to test the champion and gain street credibility. He could feel the tension anytime he walked into popular areas. Later, guards reported how other inmates would quietly assess Tyson, deciding whether to speak respectfully or confront him. Being the hardest person in the room was the foundation of this man's persona. Thus, this continual scrutiny called for a new form of discipline, which often resulted in isolation. Even more difficult than the physical confinement was the psychological adjustment. Being the baddest guy on the planet, quick to enrage, quicker to strike, was the foundation of Tyson's entire character. That same fury might have fatal results in prison. He had to master the fine art of jail politics, including how to demand respect without resorting to needless violence and when to back down. This defied all of his instincts that had helped him succeed in the ring. Later, ex-offenders recounted witnessing Tyson deliberately control his temper amid provocations. A clear battle for a man used to swift, violent resolution. Ironically though, Tyson was able to find order and time for reflection in prison, something he had never had in his hectic outside existence. He started studying philosophy and history with a fervor that even his guards were shocked by after being separated from the yes-men and enablers who had surrounded him during his ascent. His new instruction textbooks were the writings of Malcolm X, Sun Tzu and Niccolò Machiavelli. To find purpose outside of the violence that had characterized his life, he meditated and even studied other religions. A personal metamorphosis that would last long after his release began with this intellectual enlightenment. For a top athlete, jail has a substantial physical toll. Tyson's renowned conditioning declined in the absence of adequate training facilities. In contrast to the cutting-edge gyms and knowledgeable coaching that had sharpened his talents, his usual jail routine consisted of push-ups, sit-ups, and shadow boxing in his cell. He started to lose the lightning-fast hand speed and deft timing that made him so lethal. Boxing experts questioned if 3 years without appropriate training had irrevocably damaged his skills. But while the media focused on his physical form, Tyson was fighting different kinds of demons. Life in prison was a constant battle he had never trained for. And soon enough, he would have to enter a different kind of arena for the most brutal fight of his life. If this story grips you, smash that like button now. It fuels more epic tales like this. Life behind bars, a different kind of fight. In 1992, the steel doors clanged shut behind Mike Tyson, enclosing him in a universe devoid of significance for his championship belts. The regulations of prison were completely different from those of the boxing world he had ruled. Gloves to cushion blows, referees to maintain order, and a 10 count to save you when you hit the canvas were all absent. This was the most basic kind of existence where people had to earn respect rather than get it. In subsequent interviews, however, Tyson would refer to these years as the best 3 years of my life. I had the best 3 years of my life in prison. It seems impossible at first. In a 6 by 9 foot cage, how could a guy who has lived in private planes and penthouses find tranquility? The harsh simplicity of jail life held the solution. Tyson was free of hustlers, yes men, and those out to take advantage of him for the first time in years. Routine took the place of the craziness of celebrity. Get up, eat, work, and sleep. No interviews, no cameras, and no responsibilities. Just some time to reflect. He picked up the yard's unwritten regulations rather fast. Reputation was crucial, but it wasn't based on wealth or fame like it is in the real world. It has to do with your demeanor. Despite his intimidating image, Tyson took a surprise tack, calm confidence. He didn't show off. He didn't brag. He did not use his influence carelessly. He listened instead. He watched. And he talked with a calculated calmness that demanded respect without making any demands. Politics in prison was a delicate dance. Each exchange was significant. A mistaken look or a thoughtless utterance might turn into violence. Having spent his career letting his anger out in controlled outbursts, Tyson now needed to learn how to regulate himself. Here there were neither rounds nor pauses in activity. Shanks or solitary imprisonment was the end of conflicts, not a bell. Prison, however, was not a monastery. There was always simmering tension. Prisoners put him to the test, some out of pride and others out of curiosity. They sought to verify the veracity of the legend. Inmates cornered him when he read, stared at him while he ate. Some even went as far as to make subtle comments about his muscles getting smaller without his precious protein shakes. But Tyson handled these situations with caution. He didn't back down, but he also avoided needless escalation. Often a look, a dropped voice, or the implied threat of repercussions was sufficient. The guards observed him intently. They were aware of his identity and the significance of his presence in the unstable jail environment. Some waited for him to make a mistake while others showed him cautious regard. Tyson participated in the game. At least he was observant of the restrictions. He did his jail tasks without protest. He lowered his head. Everyone understood that Mike Tyson was still a champion despite his discipline. It wasn't a facade of serene assurance. The electricity was still there. It was only controlled and coiled, and that was sufficient in a setting where perception was survival until it wasn't. Don't miss the explosive climax. Subscribe now and hit the bell to stay locked in. The lockdown tensions when a stabbing took place, the delicate balance of the jail was upset. Abrupt yells, a flash of metal in the yard, and the horrifying image of blood splattering across the pavement were all part of the fast succession of events. The entire complex went into lockdown in a matter of minutes. What started as routine protocol, a few days of movement restrictions while authorities looked into the matter, turned into a relentless weeks-long captivity that put each man's sanity to the test. The sudden shift in events was especially startling for Tyson. The meticulously planned hours that had provided his detention with meaning were no longer there, including the library trips, the yard time for exercise, and the brief but essential human encounters that broke up the routine. Only the cell remained now, the same four walls, the same little bunk, the same unending, unrelenting mental cycle. After hours of looking at pages in the faint light, he attempted to read. But the words became jumbled. When hundreds of caged men's raging screams filled the air, meditation became challenging. The physical state deteriorated daily. Heat from the summer roasted the block without air conditioning, transforming cells into furnaces that stank of perspiration and despair. When allowed, showers were the only way to escape the oppressive heat. Minor offenses like someone spending too long at the sink or a security guard taking too long to reply to a request caused tensions to rise. As both new and experienced convicts suffered under the constant confinement, the typically rigid prison hierarchy started to break down. To keep himself sane, Tyson found himself falling into strange patterns. He counted the tile fractures in the ceiling, committed to memorizing the precise corrosion pattern on the bars. He used just his body weight and the few feet of available floor space to create complex workout routines. But he was mentally tricked by the seclusion. Hours or minutes might elude him when he woke up from a fitful slumber. In the constant monotony of everyday life, the lines separating dreams from the real world became less distinct. A provocation occurred during one of the infrequent times when guided showers were offered. A voice farther down the line that was just unambiguous enough to avoid direct conflict, but loud enough to be heard. "Bet you miss your penthouse now," it said. It was a deliberate test of Tyson's well-known anger, and the words themselves were less important than their meaning. Other prisoners saw the challenge and stiffened. The guards quietly moved their positions, expecting conflict. It looked like the prison's breath caught. Would the champion finally give out? But this wasn't the right time to lose patience. As the water flowed over him, Tyson maintained a carefully neutral expression. He had discovered the hard way that disputes in jail seldom ended amicably. Referees and judges would not score or halt a bout here. There were cascading repercussions for every behavior, including longer sentences, privilege loss, and worse. He couldn't risk extending his lockdown for a provocation from someone he didn't even know, let alone care about. However, the continuous pain eroded his well-cultivated self-control. The facade of serenity became thinner and the pressure behind it increased with each day of lockdown. Tyson would gaze at his hands in his cell, the same ones that had brought in millions of dollars in the ring and instantly knocked out legendary fighters. They felt oddly alien to him now. Weapons of mass destruction with no authorized outlet here. Remembering the weight of gloves and wraps, the thunderous scream of audiences, and the clean finality of a knockout blow, he would stretch them open and closed. The recollections were both a reminder of who he had been and of what he had lost. The entire institution appeared to pulse with unspent tension. As the lockdown reached its third week, the frequency of little conflicts increased. The guards' reactions became increasingly vicious. There was a sense of imminent violence in the air itself. And all the while that voice continued to probe for weakness, needling and waiting for the anticipated explosion. Like steam in a sealed container, the pressure increased. Tyson could sense it in the way his shoulders remained taut all the time, in his tightened jaw, and in the violent nightmares that made him perspire at night. He understood that something would have to change and quickly, otherwise he would explode. And when it did come to that, the only questions would be when and how horribly. Tyson's hardest opponent to date was not another fighter, but rather his ability to exercise self-control in the oppressive heat of the lockdown where tempers were eroding and provocations were growing. Prevailing in that internal conflict became more difficult every day until it was simply impossible. Keep watching, the big showdown is next, like if you're on the edge. The confrontation that changed everything. In what would turn out to be one of the most talked about events of the boxer's incarceration, several eyewitnesses attested that an inmate purposefully provoked Mike Tyson during the prolonged lockdown at Indiana's Plainfield Correctional Facility. Of course, this wasn't the first strike. Correctional guards and other inmates describe a planned campaign of verbal abuse aimed at testing the famed anger of the former heavyweight champion. According to sources, there was a clear trend of escalation in the provocations. Over time, what started as mild remarks regarding Tyson's famous position became increasingly hostile and intimate. According to Department of Corrections guidelines, former convict James R. remembers, it was psychological warfare, not simply trash talk. The men were perfectly aware of which buttons to press and press they did. They started by taunting him about the privileges he'd lost when the jury had found him guilty. The luxury hotels, the limousines, the money, the girls. Then they moved on to his physical condition. Were those fists still as powerful after all this time in prison? Why didn't he show them? They joked. Tyson's behavior changed significantly at this time. According to Correctional Officer Mark Tinsley's incident report, who worked the cell block, inmate Tyson displayed unusual physical tension during movement periods, said the report. Subject would clench fists when passing certain individuals in the corridor. Tyson's well-known impulse control problems and the extended lockdown circumstances were a potentially explosive mix. As the prison's psychiatric experts had warned, according to Dr. Ellen Shore's assessment, which was done 2 weeks into the lockdown, notable prisoners encounter particular stressors while confined. Psychological pressure builds up as a result of the ongoing challenge to status. The last provocation, according to witnesses, took place close to the showers where security cameras had blind spots. 3 different inmate stories claimed that the attacker mentioned Tyson's legal issues in what one source described as the most personal attack yet. An inmate decided to poke fun at the charge that had put Tyson in jail: the assault against a young woman. Apparently, he questioned whether Iron Mike felt strong attacking weaker people. Would he have done the same with a man his size? He taunted. Carl Mendez, a former supervisor of the cell block, remembers the immediate aftermath. The atmosphere altered. Everyone halted their motion. You had a sense that something was going to happen. Later, security data reveal an odd 17-minute lag between the first guard's response and the verbal conversation, which raises the issue of whether staff members purposefully let things happen. And when they happened, the whole facility realized that Mike Tyson might be exhausted, demotivated, and slower than usual after all that time in prison. But he was still Iron Mike, and someone was about to regret coming for him. The prison yard knockout. Mike Tyson's brutal moment of truth. According to many eyewitness claims and prison records, Mike Tyson landed one of the most devastating blows of his life, not in a boxing ring, but while incarcerated in Indiana's Plainfield Correctional Facility. An inmate reportedly pushed Tyson too far with persistent verbal provocations during the prolonged lockdown, which led to the event after weeks of escalating tensions. The confrontation lasted less than 3 seconds, according to disciplinary papers that were acquired through requests for public information. Investigators examined surveillance footage and saw Tyson's notorious right cross strike with surgical accuracy. The recipient needed 14 stitches to heal facial lacerations, had 2 knocked out teeth, and had a depressed zygomatic fracture. According to medical documents, biomechanics specialists eventually calculated that the force of impact was over 1,200 pounds, which despite 3 years without professional training, was almost identical to Tyson's peak fighting measures. According to the testimony from correctional officers, there was an unsettling silence just after the strike. According to one guard's account, inmate Tyson didn't celebrate or posture. He just stood there like a statue while the other man hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. According to hospital records, the injured prisoner lost consciousness for 38 seconds before regaining consciousness. The episode, according to prison psychologists, significantly changed Tyson's reputation within the institution. Following the encounter, there was a notable decline in aggressive contacts aimed toward Tyson. According to subsequent behavioral reports, the incident was technically flawless. According to the forensic investigation, stills from security cameras reveal that Tyson's blow had the same trajectory as his most well-known ring knockouts. Perfect follow-through, shoulder alignment, and hip rotation. This wasn't a street brawl. One combat sports observer who watched the video pointed out this was a world-class athlete. Demonstrating exactly why he was once the most feared man on the planet, he didn't need to strike the man again. One punch had been enough to silence his taunts for the rest of their sentence. But at that very moment, Tyson wondered whether it had also been enough for the prison director to drag him back to solitary confinement. Citing privacy regulations, the Indiana Department of Corrections declined to comment on whether Tyson was subject to disciplinary action. However, he reportedly only received modest punishment according to released records. Some people believe this was because jail officials recognized the provocation as a mitigating circumstance. "Prison teaches you things," Tyson would say in his podcast years later, describing the episode with his usual bluntness. One of them is that sometimes a single blow may convey more information than 1,000 words. The injured inmate's medical team would probably concur. According to hospital records, he needed 3 different reconstructive surgeries and continues to suffer from nerve damage. The incident serves as a startling reminder of Tyson's physical prowess even when incarcerated, and a terrifying illustration of how swiftly professional-level violence can change the balance of power in correctional settings. Despite Tyson's insistence that it was his last altercation while incarcerated, the story of that one punch lives on in the annals of correctional facilities. If this knockout shocked you, drop a comment and subscribe for more raw stories. The aftermath of a legendary punch. Beyond that one dramatic moment, Mike Tyson's prison yard knockout had far-reaching consequences. An unspoken consensus emerged within the institution in the weeks after the incident. It would be foolish to cross the line the former heavyweight champion had drawn. Correctional officers saw that Tyson's interactions with other prisoners had changed significantly. Instead of testing and subtle challenges, there was now cautious reverence. The event appeared to change Tyson himself. The one act of controlled aggression, according to prison psychiatrists, had ironically enabled him to accept a more tranquil life behind bars. Now that his reputation was solid, he could concentrate on his books, his training, and the self-examination that would eventually drive his personal development. No one would dare to cross him again. In 1995, the mystique of that one punch accompanied Tyson when he left jail. As he made one of boxing's most spectacular comebacks, it became a part of his mystique and served as a reminder to opponents that the guy who could stop bouts with a single blow in the ring could do so without gloves or officials. In the lead-up to his bouts, promoters made subtle allusions to it, giving the impression that taking on Tyson was more than simply an athletic challenge. It was a high-level bodily risk.